live.
And we're live.
Good morning.
Yeah, good morning again, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on what time you're watching us. It seems like 5 minutes. We were here for the last one. They're coming thick and fast, aren't they?
Yeah. We're coming to think every Friday now, pretty much, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'm not very fast, so that only leaves one option, I guess. Okay, so let's crack on. So today, profitability, am I making any money? It seems like a bizarre question to ask in some respects, because surely people know whether they're making money or not. But let's crack on straight into the first slide, because I think this sums it up perfectly, the nub of what we're getting to today. We know we're making money because we just know we are. Now, that's not something we've made up. It's in speech marks, because that's a quote, isn't it? That's a comment that we hear fairly often. And that relates to people just being able to see at a high level P&L, doesn't it? Profit and loss. It's like, well, we're running a business and we know every month, every quarter, every year, or whatever the case may be, we know whether we're making money or not. But I guess what we're saying here today is, for a lot of people, a lot of businesses, that's the extent of what they know, isn't it, Adam?
Yeah, it's not having the tools to analyse your margins in a clear way. So the profit and loss, they've made money. They might have had a good year. They've made a big margin, perhaps, in general over the whole business. But it's actually having the tools to look at, well, where have we made margin? Because you might have made a margin in large areas of the business, but there could be areas where actually you're losing money and you're not that clear on it. Yeah.
So that's the purpose of today's webinar. Is we're going to talk briefly around some of the common pitfalls and some of the conversations that we have commonly with customers and prospects. And then we're going to move on to look at some of the tools that we have in the system that can help us get a bit more detail behind the headline numbers. So again, if we move on to the next slide. So challenges of not knowing your profitability. Yeah, take it away, Ed.
Yeah, so these are sort of things I noted down after obviously I have conversations like this on a daily basis with clients or potential clients, and these are things I've noted down that tend to come up quite a lot when the sort of challenges they have of like the title says, of not knowing what is profitable and what isn't. So we can go through all these one by one, but generally it's all about reporting, in my opinion. Just not having that clarity there. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if we pick a few out, am I running unprofitable service contracts? That's one that initially stands out to me, this being the first time I've seen these, but that seems obvious to me, because again, I hear that quite a lot over the years, having had hundreds, if not thousands, of conversations with people in service-led businesses. That's something that people fundamentally don't know. And even if they do know, there's this level of detail behind that, which I guess we'll come on to probably at some point in the demonstration, is a contract might involve numerous sites, or it might involve multiple pieces of equipment or multiple assets. It's about the detail around the individual sites or the individual assets, isn't it? That it goes back to what you said earlier. You could look at a contract and possibly be able to derive from the information that is available to you that I make £2,000-3,000 a year on that contract. What we're getting to is actually there may be some quite simplistic things that you can do to add more margin to that contract.
Yeah, and one of the common ones we hear about that is, and I think we spoke about this the other day, is you might have, say you've got a lot of contracts, or clients got a lot of contracts with different size companies. They've got large contracts that they would deem their most important clients that bring in a large majority of their profits or their revenue, let's say. But actually, when you look at the detail of it, they might not be anywhere near as profitable as a bunch of the small contracts.
Yeah.
But they may not be aware of that, because they can't report back and see, well, there's a lot more, let's say, assets or equipment on this large contract. But actually, when you look at the detail of those trucks or whatever these assets happen to be, they're not making any money, or they're making very little.
Yeah, a lot of these are around that kind of conversation, which is, what do you want, more revenue or more margin? Now, obviously the answer is both, but it's about also being able to maximize the margin even in the existing revenue. One of the things that also stood out to me in the bottom right next to that is, how do I quote a fair price and remain competitive? Now, quoting for work is, we'd like to think of science, but in my experience, for most people, it's a little bit of a finger in the air. And the way that they calculate the cost is a best guess or an idealized situation, as in we'll take this many visits, or we'll go that often and it'll take that long. And that's how they calculate the cost. And that's how but the reality is they're not basing that information on what has happened. It's what they think might happen. And that's a key difference, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's having the sort of the numbers you can trust on that. And you're not like you say, you're not just sticking your finger in the air and hoping actually that's a fair competitive price. It's actually looking at numbers, thrashing the detail out, understanding, well, what can we quote on that? Competitive, because there could be a position where actually they're making a lot more margin. Hopefully they're in a position where they're making loads more margin than not so much they need to be, but they can allow for, and therefore lowering the price makes them slightly competitive if they ever need to. And
there are quite a few occasions when they might want to do it just to keep customers sweet for whatever reason. So I've heard that quite a lot in meetings where they go, well, we'll do them a favour in this instance because maybe they were a bit late to a job or something of that nature, so they'll knock a bit off a quote. So knowing how much you have to play with is always useful.
Yeah,
exactly.
No detail of profit or loss. It's relatively self-explanatory. Unable to plan for growth is an important one, because
it's having the foresight of what's coming.
Yeah, you can't. If you want to grow. Yeah, some people are fortunate enough they can just let it happen organically, but for a lot of us, it's about planning financially for the future, and without the right financial details, it's almost impossible to do that. And that goes nicely into the top left with jeopardizing the future of your business. Sounds quite a dramatic statement to make, but it's true really, because as you alluded to just a second ago, that there are inevitably customers and contracts that make much more margin than others. So there's very profitable customers and unprofitable customers. And often, depending on, if everyone has some kind of turnover or churn of the customer base, it's about knowing which ones you can afford to lose and which ones you can't. And if you start losing a couple of profitable companies or customers, it can have a significant impact. So yeah, it's a dramatic statement, but an important one. All right, we're kind of whizzing through this because I think we're all very conscious that every webinar we've ever done has massively run over. So let's move on to the next slide.
Have a tendency of just talking a little bit too much, don't we?
Yeah, and which is great, because as we said before, I think it just demonstrates that we're passionate about it.
Yeah.
This is a really important slide for me. I don't know why there's a guy pushing a large meatball up a hill, but
I just thought that was the most relevant one, really.
Your large Malteser.
There's four things there, just to briefly explain it, because I think they are really core to what this topic is about. Where is the good data? Now, what this goes back to, it's important to say when we're going through this, is in order to generate quality data, because this is what people want. It's like, well, how do I get, we've talked about all this stuff about, oh, well, this is what you need to do, this is what you need to review, this is the information you need. The reason that people don't produce that information is because currently they can't. Now, obviously, we're leading people down a path here to say, well, use a piece of software to do it, and one that's capable of capturing that data. It's important to say that where is the good data? Well, most of the information that's generated out the back end that's actionable is actually collated at the front end by the engineering team, isn't it?
Yeah, if you think sort of relating to our solution here, but every bit of data, or probably 90% of data that goes into the system or that is used on a daily basis, does come from the engineer. They've got to capture, and it's not like it's an effort for them to capture it, they're just generally capturing it as their jobs go along. But because they're capturing information, certain information, parts, time, let's say, as an example, that's already in the system then, and you can then easily report on that. No one's having to manually enter that in to generate their own manual report.
Which leads neatly on to how easy is it to capture the data, because what you also don't want to do is, you might recognize that a lot of it is captured at the coalface by the engineers, but what we don't want to do is make that task so laborious and so difficult and so labor intensive that the engineers are resistant to it. So you need to make it really simple to do. And we're not going to talk about it today or show it today, but there are webinars that we've done, a couple previously, where we look at the mobile solution. And I think it's important that people, if people want to have a look at, well, how easy is it to capture the data, they can refer back to some of those, can't they? And And then these last two are absolutely vital to this conversation. Can it be presented in an easily digestible format? And do I have enough confidence in the data to take meaningful action?
Yeah, no, it's definitely. I mean, the third one can be presented in that format. It is crucial because you could have all that information from a job, back from an engineer's job, let's say, what parts he's used, what stock or labour or any expenses or general financial information about a job. But how do you find that and how do you see it and what does it mean?
Yeah, well, I think what that represents is, again, conversations that we have where people might have some data or a lot of data in the system, but the current service management or ERP system, whatever it is they use, they don't have a report that generates the information that they want to look at. And it's too difficult to do it manually. Or if they do it manually, it's too prone to error because they're generating information perhaps in Excel coming from multiple sources. So what we mean by that is there a way that you can access that data, which is pretty simplistic, and present it in a way that's easy for you to understand?
That's it.
And the end one is, of course, why am I looking at all of this data? Well, it's because you want to do something as a consequence of it, or you at least want the option to do something as a consequence of it. So do I have enough confidence in the data to take meaningful action? Well, it goes back to the start of the process, from the point that it's captured right through to the point where you report on it. We again hear all the time that people, they say, well, yes, we say, do you have meaningful reporting? They say, well, I do have some reporting. Okay, it's difficult to get hold of. And as a consequence of it being difficult to get hold of that information, it develops a feeling of mistrust in the quality of that data, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, exactly. You're right. And it's being able to have that confidence in the data so you can make those important business decisions.
Yeah.
Knowing you can trust it, because sometimes you might, like you say, if you go back to the step before, you've not got it in the right format, you don't particularly trust it. Does that mean you can take any meaningful action against it? Probably not, because you've not got the confidence in it.
Yeah, you're worried you're going to make a mistake. Whereas if you can make sure that process from beginning to end is simple, then once you do get to the end point of seeing the data, you can do something about it. And they are all of the important things that make a difference around profitability. I can see that an asset is unprofitable. I can see that a contract is unprofitable. I can see that a customer is unprofitable, whatever the case may be. I've got a contract with 10 pieces of equipment on it. 2 of those pieces of equipment are tanking the margin. I need to pull those pieces of equipment out. I need to swap them. I need to do something about it. They're the important decisions that across an entire business lift your margins, don't they?
Yeah, no, exactly.
Importantly, it needs to be real time as well, because it's pointless getting to the end of the contract, finding out that you've lost a load of money. And as you said, pulling a piece of equipment out before it starts, taking all the profit out of a contract, if it's higher, for example. So if that information is real time, then you can do something about it before it becomes a serious problem.
Yeah.
Okay,
and that is easily summed up in the title of that slide. Is it just too difficult? And for a lot of people, many people, the answer is, yeah, it is.
Yeah, no, well, today I'll show you how it can be easy.
Nice segue. It's like you've done this before.
So I'll get on to that now, shall I? Okay, so now's the time of the webinar where I do a bit of a demonstration and just sort of show the viewers a bit of a glimpse of what the software can do. Mainly, obviously, what I'll focus on today is around profitability and just reporting in general. As a lot of our viewers may have already seen on previous webinars, when I log into the Servicing solution, this is my homepage. So each user in one system can design and create their own homepage and put whatever information they want on there. So I've put on lots of modules here that I use more often than not when doing these demonstrations. They're easy to access when I log in. However, I've also got live data on here too. So we've got reports that I've created here. So equipment by status, jobs by charge code, which is what type of job it is. Is it chargeable? Is it non-chargeable? And then also profitability by equipment. And these live KPIs here as well, which is live information running through the system. So as a job's built up today, so will that number, and open breakdowns will do the same as well. So when you log in, you get, each user has the ability to have all the information presented to them that's important for them to do their role. So for today's purpose, we're going to be focused on profitability. So I thought it'd be useful to drop on a profitability by equipment, because again, you might have lots of assets out on site, on customer sites, but which ones are profitable, which ones aren't. Fortunately, you can see from this one, most of ours, or if not all of them, are profitable, which is a good thing to have. So that's on here now. And then we've set it up so we can have filters on there. So this is all equipment I have out on different customer sites. However, I can hit down here and do various filters on different sites. So if I, as an example, just choose two Asda accounts, tick that, you'll see the data's now moved, and we can see, well, it's drilled down to the 7 assets we have out on 2 different Asda sites. Again, they're all pretty profitable, which is a good sign.
If this data were true, you'll be getting a lot of job offers as a service manager.
Yeah. I've actually manipulated it for that reason. And I log in here, and we have that there, so you can view over it, see the profit. So
yeah, this is great because quite often we do speak to people that they might have a responsibility for certain contracts, or I mean, look, how realistic is it that you're going to do this for every single customer that you've got? But even if you focus in on it, this is obviously day to day, but even if you're focused on specific contracts that you're responsible for, or even if it's bigger contracts that you have, a lot of revenue from, or as a lot of assets with, or even if it's, stuff that's coming up for renewal. Do you know what I mean? It's, if you've got a 3-year contract with somebody, then let's be honest, okay, you're going to do your best throughout the 3 years, but there are periods in that relationship where information about it becomes more important, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, exactly. And just having the visibility to see that as quickly as we can here is important.
What's great about that is, if you look, because we're looking at one customer, and I know it doesn't show it in here, but those N2 that are much less profitable or have less revenue, they could be below the line, couldn't they, in showing actually that,
yeah, they could be a negative.
They could be showing that actually there's more cost than profit. And I think that's what I was getting at earlier, is we could say, right, well, for this customer, we've got 7 items on there. 2 of them are unprofitable. Overall, the contract is well in profit. But actually, if we can find out what the issue is with those 2 assets, then we can make another 25% margin on that one customer. And if you can do that across the board, I know I'm using extreme examples of percentages, but that is the point of this, isn't it? Is people don't have that level of visibility. It's just not available to them. Or if it is, as we said in the last slide, it's just too difficult to get it.
Yeah. It's really important because information is power. And the beauty of these reports are you can click on those, drill into them, and then you can have a look at the jobs to find out what's going on. So it might be that you've had to do a lot of chargeable jobs as part of a contract, a hire contract, because that piece of equipment's not serviced properly.
So you can go, what you've done there is you can click on one specific asset.
Yep. Sorry, that's what I did then.
Yeah, and then you've got access to all of the data associated with that asset.
Yeah. So what's happened?
And by selecting that, it'll manipulate even just this table that you're looking at. So from this position, you don't have to go into lots of complicated reporting tools. Actually, once it's here, you can then actually just manipulate it from the home screen to show you the data that you want.
Yeah. And a main part of the solution is obviously there's the self-service reports, which we'll come on to later. But if this profitability by equipment isn't something that interests you, but another part of your business does, that you want to see how profitable it is, it's quite easy to go in and make similar reports as and when you wish.
I mean, that's a really important part, isn't it? Because not everybody has a degree in computer science or understands how tables work.
Or the tools.
Exactly. So, I mean, literally that report we put together yesterday in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
It needs to be that simple that most of the users that you want to allow to do that, they can build reports that help them run their department and give them visibility of what's important quickly and easily. It's pointless having that data if it's only available to a select few, because really, what use is that?
Yeah, exactly. So I think what I'll touch on now is contracts, because I have got a tab open here for contracts, which we can look at. So basically what I've done here is I've gone into a service contract, and against service contracts, just to very briefly explain it, we have your contract period and the equipment on that contract. So we can see here, we've got 4 assets, in which in this example, the 4 trucks, but we've got 4 different pieces of equipment on one contract. So you list them on the contract, and behind that, you also list the service frequencies and when it's serviced. So the system ultimately builds up that service life of the asset and the jobs associated with it. Now, because it can do that, it's got the data in the background to do that. It can also build the revenue and cost of those contracts and the jobs that it's carrying out on those trucks, which again comes back to where you collect the data from. And then once you've collected that data, we can report on it here to view, well, for this contract, here's the revenue and cost on them.
One of the things we probably don't have time to do in a webinar is explain how the costs associated with jobs and contracts are collated and to produce this information. So it's important to say that if people want some reassurance about that or are curious as to how that's done, to make sure that they have confidence that this information is accurate, then of course they can get in touch with us and we can have that conversation with them. But essentially it's collating a cost that you've dictated associated with attending site, with supplying parts, with traveling to jobs, the amount of visits, all that kind of stuff. Everything that you do in relation to this contract, everything you do carries a cost. And then obviously, you've got the revenue associated with whether you're charging ad hoc or whether you're doing a full maintenance contract or whether you're doing periodic invoicing. All of that is accommodated in here, but ultimately is boiled down to these simplistic high-level figures. As you said, this is available on every contract. So every contract you look at, the first thing you're going to see is
those figures.
And obviously it's not always going to be the piece of information that you're interested in, and you can move on and ignore it. But I think it is important that this is presented to people on an ongoing basis every time they're looking at a contract, because it will, over time, at least, even if you don't go in and look at all of the data in detail, eventually it's going to highlight those contracts where there's a problem.
Well,
and this, sorry, mate, just to cut across you finally, this dovetails into, you look at this whole contract and go, maybe it isn't making as much money as I expect. Then you can go and look at the report that we just looked at, equipment by profitability, and say, why is it not coming? Yeah. And then as you were drilling down and say, well, that it's because that piece of equipment is not profitable and it's costing us loads of money. Then you use the drill down and say, okay, let's find out why that piece of equipment is not profitable. Oh, I can see it's because it's, we've had 15 breakdown calls in the last 3 months.
Yeah, it's, in my opinion, it's critical having this sort of data available to you freely on a daily basis. Almost, if you need to look at a daily basis, you probably wouldn't do it. But having it there is it's probably one of those things. Once you do have it, and once you have it and don't have it, that's probably when you would notice. Not from not having it, but I find the conversations I have, it's a critical piece of information that you need when you're looking at your contracts.
Yeah, and one of the things that I always hear is people at kind of senior or mid-management level who are tasked with collating reports and delivering it to an MD or a board or the rest of the team or whatever the case may be. And it's a nightmare. And they spend countless hours of their time trying to draw together information to present a report. And even then, when they do get it, they don't trust it.
No. It's like we spoke at the start, isn't it? Because just where is the data coming from? How can you just, if you don't really know where it's coming from and it's not organised in a way where you can present it, how are you ever going to trust it?
Yeah. Okay.
But okay, so that's a contract perspective. Now I'm going to jump to a job perspective now. So, as again, if other viewers are tuned into our previous webinars, they'll probably know how our job system works. Ultimately, the system does manage any type of reactive service, install, repair work, whatever it might be. And because of that, we take in different aspects of the job and add them as costs. So what I'm looking at here is I've jumped into job 680, which was completed by myself at some point in the past. And straight away, it breaks down parts, expenses, labour onto a job. But I think it's important to explain where they've come from, rather than just showing you the charts behind them. So as you can see, we have different tabs for every job. Go to the overview. This is just a very light job here. It's showing me the asset was broken down. So that was the core reason I went out. But really, if we could break these down now, this is the important part. We can see parts. So I fitted on 3 parts onto this job.
I suppose say most of this info, as we said at the start, most of this info is being added in the field by the engineer as they're doing it.
All I've done as an engineer perspective is just chosen 3 stock items. I've used these stock items, put them on the job. The engineer is not concerned about the cost and sell price. That populates from the office system.
Yeah.
So all he's done is adding 3 parts. The system then can figure out the revenue, cost, and margin on the parts alone. Then see the time booked onto it. So I've booked on from 3 hours worth of labour from 11:04 to 14:04. But before that, I travelled to the site for 3 hours as well. So on that, again, it's booked the margin based on what you pay your engineers labour and travel rates.
Yeah.
Go on to that, we have the general job details like work done, so photos that have been taken, quotes perhaps that have been generated from it, and we can also put the job sheet, which I won't go into today. But lastly is where you have expenses. So we're trying to take into account every possible cost on the job, from parts, labour, stock. Sorry, I've already said stock, expenses, call out fees, and everything that contributes to that full cost.
And even on the stock, it's not assumed or average pricing. It's real pricing that you raise a purchase order, purchase the part, and when you use that part, it's the exact price that you paid for it that goes on.
Exactly. So you can then see for every job, your total job margin, your parts margin, your labour, and your travel. And if we break these lines down one by one, you can see it's got them listed out. And these bar charts here basically display where your margins are at.
Yeah, it's good that, because I think visually, potentially there is a lot of information that can overwhelm, and you're not going to go through every single tab of this and look at every single field. The reality is what we're doing here is we've got a completed job that we're now processing to say, right, we're going to bill it, or whatever the ultimate outcome is. But I think from a high level point of view, there's just some very easy to view indicators here in the color scheme that would draw your eye and say, okay, I've got a whole red bar there. What is it? It's expenses.
Exactly.
Now, that might be just part and parcel of what you do, or you might be looking at it and saying, actually, should we be passing that parking charge on to the customer for this job?
Yeah, no, exactly. So you can see that there. It brings it straight to your attention. So okay, so that's the information about our job. Obviously, we've explained where all the data comes from. What I want to take you to now is our reporting suite, or business intelligence module. So within this, we have a few different tabs. Straight away, it brings you to what we call our KPI viewer. So it's giving you live data for today's day. You can change the period and say, well, show me all my open jobs from today, or closed jobs. If I clicked into them, it'd show me pie charts. But the reason I'm here today is to go into this reporting. So we've got lots of different subsections of the reports: customers, stock. So it could be around stock valuation, perhaps, and looking at stock levels and the cost of them. Sales and equipment and scheduling. Scheduling is usually around jobs and response times. But the reason we're here today is to look at the accounts one, because we're really interested in the financial figures here. So we've got a lot of accounting reports here, looking at stuff like spend summaries, perhaps. So you can see what you spend, invoicing to date, and what you got, and comparing your invoices from last year. But if we focus on revenue cost analysis, here's where you can basically filter almost any part of the data in the system to pull out a revenue and cost report. So what I typically show as a first point of call in here is looking at a customer account. So if I go to, let's say, search here, it's brought up our customers. I haven't got lots of customers to the account, but they're all very profitable customers, I should say. If I click on that one, Asda, and then maybe select a period, so if I say this year perhaps, and hit apply, it pulls up the revenue cost for Asda this year. So it's broken down all the data that the engineers have collected against Asda and pulled it into this report here.
I mean, that's really useful, isn't it? Because not only does it show you the headline revenue cost profit margin, but it, as you said, it breaks it down into jobs, parts, labour, contracts for preventative maintenance and hire, any equipment you've sold, or any parts. But it also gives you all of the minute detail, like every single job, every single part. And you can export that data should you.
Yeah, I was about to say that. That's an important part of it. You can export it into Excel or PDF if you need to. We can go through these, and you can look at the likes of charge code as an example. Now, charge code and service gene is like, as Gary explained earlier, is a type of work. So I can hit into this and say, well, as you can see, a lot of this work for Asda has been chargeable. There's only been a bit of service chargeable and not much warranty at all. So it's maybe not a good example of Asda, but it will build up the type of work you will carry out here. So are you doing a lot of service non-chargeable? Well, why?
Yeah. Is there any FOC work or?
Yeah. That is really important if you do full maintenance contracts as well. Because if you're doing a full maintenance contract with a company, with a customer, but you end up doing some chargeable work, they're going to want to know why. And using the cost codes is a very, very easy way to filter in all that data and come up with all the work that you've done that covers the contract and the work that's sat outside and then you can give that report, because you can actually do a report exactly like this in the system, but a customer facing one, which doesn't have costs, which is quite important.
I think sorry, go on, Ed.
No, it's fine.
I was going to say, just very quickly before we move off this, and we'll look at specific reports that you're talking about there. Just very quickly, so you can drill down as well before I forget. As an example, we've looked at a customer account. We can look at the site, but let's look at a piece of equipment now. So if I say, right, well, this is the revenue cost against Asda, let's have a look at equipment. Here's the equipment on Asda's site, but I'm just going to select this one as an example. Close that. The period's this year. Hit apply. And the figures are now changed. And we're looking at a specific asset now on that customer account.
What's good is that if you just bring down the options at the top again, you can do any combination of those. So you can say, I only want to look at warranty work for that piece of equipment, or I want to look at full maintenance and full maintenance chargeable, or higher and higher customer damage, or a specific engineer. So again, you can look at the profitability of one or more engineers as a whole, or within certain periods of time, or for specific customers. So any combination of those that you can do, not only internally, but for the customer as well.
Exactly, and it's all there. You can export, as we've already mentioned, and you can. There's just a lot of filter tools behind that. I can't think of any more we could add to it, to be honest, around the job. But it pulls that information up there for you. But okay, so there's sort of a clear revenue cost analysis that I wanted to bring up, because again, this is about half the webinar's about. It's an important point. And lastly, I wanted to take you to our self-service reporting. Now, we've already done a webinar on this in the past, so some of our viewers again may have seen this. But in essence, it's basically it's a part of the system where the users, so our customers and their users, basically can create their own reports, and they can pull out any data they want, create the report, as we saw on the homepage, the profitability by equipment. So this is where we can view that. So as you can see, I've got lots of different reports that I've created or my colleagues have created in here. Could be around first-time fix rates, purchase orders, invoicing. We've got a profitability one here. So if I click into this and we'll look at editing it.
This is the one that you got on your home screen.
Yeah, the profitability by equipment.
Yeah. So I think what we're trying to illustrate here is if there is anything that you want to look at in relation to that isn't in the reports module. So every part of the system of those kind of different sections have got what we call standard reports, haven't they? Which is what we looked at earlier. So the cost revenue analysis is a standard report. But as we said earlier in the discussion, often that's often what happens with people that we talk to. They have a piece of software, if they use one, that is shipped with a standard set of reports, not one that's as flexible as a cost revenue analysis. It'll be something that's kind of fixed. What this allows you to do is say, well, if the information you're interested in doesn't come with the reports that are shipped with the system, actually go and generate your own report, because you've got access to all of the data fields, which you can cross-reference across different tables. And that's how you come up with what you created here, profitability by equipment. Basically, so you're going in and saying, this is what I'm interested in, and this is the format that I want to see it in. It's a bar graph, it's a pie chart, it's a line graph, whatever it happens to be. That's the key difference, isn't it? You don't have to rely on the reports that are shipped with the system. You can go in and generate and look at anything that you want to that is in the system. And that's a very key difference for this idea of being able to see true cost, true profitability, and action it.
Oh yeah, and it's just having that information on demand, isn't it? And be able to have that presented in a meaningful way. In the past, there's probably a lot of our old customers might know, or customers that have used different solutions. With the old technology, you'd be going back to the software supplier and asking them to write a report, which would, and that the timeline that could depend on their resources, how busy they are. Whereas now you've got that information on demand, and you can go into tools like this and just create it instantly.
So on the right hand side is where you kind of manipulate.
Yeah. So
how it looks like, what it looks like, what's in there, all the stuff that you have access to.
Yeah. So I can change. This is a very simple example. I can change the color scheme if I wanted to. So hit that, and we can dictate how it looks.
So you truly are building this from the ground up, aren't you? But in a very simplistic way.
Yeah, so this is just the sort of the visuals of it. You're building the looks of it, but the important part here is the data set. So here you can go through the data fields or the data sets in the system or in a database. I pick and choose various aspects of them. So to look at jobs, we can look at, well, what the invoice values of a job, who completed the job, which engineer was on it. And we can drag them into certain reports and pull up the information like this.
Yeah, and importantly, we have things called data slices, which is obviously in that report that you can see, as opposed to having it across all pieces of equipment. You can use a data slicer to say, well, I want to look at an individual customer's account, or I want to look at a certain date period or something of that nature. So it takes what is just a basic graph with information and allows you to manipulate it to be more specific about what you look at. And then obviously you can then allow it to drill in and look at further data that sits behind it, which is really important.
Yeah, it's not just a static report, really, is it?
Yeah.
Okay,
so,
great.
Sorry, go on, Gary.
No, go on, mate. Did you have
I was
something
going to say,
else?
so yeah, it's a really powerful tool, and for the purpose today, we're very looks at profitability. But as you can imagine, by looking at all those data sets on the right hand side, you can pull up for virtually almost any part of the system, whether it's around stock parts, engineering.
That's an important thing to mention, actually, that ad, because obviously what we try to do in our software is make as much of it self-service as possible. As you can see by the title, saves self-service. So one of the features that we allow is the ability to create your own service check sheets, calibrations, tests, and that sort of thing. Well, using this software, using this BI tool, you can report at that level. So if you create a field for a piece of equipment or you create a specific service sheet, you can report at the service sheet level. So you can say, how many pieces of equipment in this time period did we have this type of reading on this type of check sheet?
Yeah, like fault codes or something like that.
Exactly. So that's real granular data that you can get there.
Good. Look, I think we've done what we set out to achieve. Of course, the purpose of today is to just give people an overview and say, look, there is a different way of getting to this information and really genuinely being able to improve the situation that you find yourselves in relation to reporting and consequently profitability. There are lots of other angles to profitability, aren't there, like first time fix rates and stuff like that. And we've done webinars and all of that stuff. But I think today was about focusing on how do I establish where the profitability is and where do I establish how I can be more profitable. And I think we've done that. And of course, if anybody wants any further information, then by all means, we'd be, I'm sure, Adam, you'd be delighted to take them through, a more detailed demonstration of the things that we've covered today.
Yeah, well, I'll just put my contact details on there just to show everyone now. But yeah, I'm happy to go through this in a lot more detail if people want to see how it works, ask us a few questions, because obviously it's difficult in a half an hour webinar to get all the points across, and we could probably, the three of us, sit here until Monday morning talking about it if we wanted to.
Importantly, what we want to do is, or what you want to do is get to know the company and what their needs are and their requirements are.
Yeah, no, exactly. So, yeah, that's been a good conversation to have today, really. And if anyone does have any questions, then there's my mobile number or email. Feel free to drop me a line.
I'm sure it'll be ringing before we finish.
It's not stopped. It's just started now, actually.
Great. Well, look, we'll leave it there because we're at 39 minutes, and that's probably the first time we've got under 40 minutes for quite some time for a webinar. So we'll leave it for today. Adrian, Adam, again, thank you for your contributions. I've really enjoyed that discussion today. Hopefully, people have derived some value from it. I'm sure, but as I said at the start, it only seems like 5 minutes since we were on the last one, so I'm sure it'll only seem like 5 minutes till we're back again with another webinar. So hopefully we'll see you then. Hopefully you've enjoyed it, and hopefully we'll see you and speak to you soon. Cheers, guys.
Great. Cheers. Thanks for that.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.